All right, hi everybody, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about a bunch of different concepts, stocks, and market trends. So one of my viewers, for example, asked me to talk about the recent Lululemon's business performance and of course the stock performance as well. I'll briefly talk about what I think about the valuations in US stocks specifically. I'll also bring up a couple of stocks that I looked in more in depth on my blog. And there are a few more things I have on my little notepad here. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, let's kick things off with Lululemon. I think I recorded a video on Lululemon probably a year ago or so. And I think we're pretty much back to the price Lululemon traded at, around a year ago. So we are right now looking at a share price of $260 per share. And back in October 2024, well, Lululemon stock was trading in a similar price range. And yeah, the stock actually nicely recovered back from the 2024 lows. At one point, if I'm not mistaken, it was up 70% from the August 2024 low, but back from the high in January, the stock is now back down to previous levels, down 37%. And after the recent quarterly result, the stock actually dropped by, if I'm not mistaken, 22%, which is a pretty steep decline for a multi-billion dollar market cap stock like Lululemon. So what happened? I bookmarked a few things here just to highlight the business performance. So just to give you an overview of the key metrics here. So revenue in the most recent quarter continued to grow by 7%. Gross profit actually grew by 8%. The operating margin stands at 18.5%. Earnings per share grew at a rate of 2.3%. And Lululemon, if I'm not mistaken, that's what I remember, is pretty much also a buyback story by now. The total share count is actually down 4.5% year over year, which is quite substantial for most publicly traded companies. So what are my takes on Lululemon's stock? Is it an opportunity right now? I'll share the valuation multiples the stock is trading at in just a moment, but I came across a brief sort of elevator pitch for Lululemon stock that I shared on X also around a year ago. I shared it in September of 2024. So at a similar price level that, as I said, we are looking at right now. And I shared one elevator pitch from an investor letter that I found that is super concise, and I'll share it on screen again, and let me just read it to you again. So we have a pitch that states, where do we start? The yoga pants and clothing company has had an amazing post-pandemic run that is approaching its end. Its growth in the US is slow, non-existent at the moment, but it is growing very fast in China and Europe. I think that international growth is likely to endure, and that its US slowness is likely to be temporary. Lululemon shares are not quote-unquote cheap, but they are on sale for an average price. I think the company will grow faster than average over the next 5 years. I would be wrong if Lululemon is a fad gone bust or faces a huge post-pandemic hangover as people get used to leaving the house more. We'll see. And just to provide like full context here, back when that investor letter was published, and I don't remember who it was from. It states Middle Coast Investing here. Back then, Lululemon was only around a 2.5% position of that investor's fund, so not a material stake here. What do I think of Lululemon? I looked at it a year ago more closely, and maybe I should take another close look. So I haven't done any deep dive prior to recording this video here, but generally I can say that I'm very cautious when it comes to investing in retail stocks. I think Leandro, I think he's part of the Best Anchor Stocks blog crew. I think this blog, if I'm not mistaken, is run by multiple people. I think he shared a blog post only for paid subscribers, though, in which he outlined why he too has to admit that retail is just a notoriously tough industry to operate in. And fashion retail, being a fashion brand, may be even more challenging because fashion trends are so fickle and so hard to predict over the long term that as an investor, it's really hard to form a strong opinion about the long-term trajectory of the business. Obviously, there are fashion brands that have done incredibly well. Also, fashion brands in the athletic space. Take Nike, for example, which is also going through a rough patch right now. However, I'm pretty confident that Nike will recover over the long term as a brand, but yeah, they are having their own set of challenges that they have to deal with right now. So retail is hard, being a fashion brand is hard, and taking this together, I would only be interested in purchasing shares in a fashion retailer at the right price. And that price probably would have to be maybe even a single digit multiple on a free cash flow or earnings, or yeah, maybe EBIT basis as well. And if we look at the valuation multiples Lululemon is trading at right now, well, we can see, let me just get it over here. Yeah, that the stock is trading at a last 12-month price to earnings ratio of 17 to 18 times. However, and that's the one metric that stood out to me, it's trading at around 12.6 times last 12-month operating income, which is a historically low valuation. So the mean EV to EBIT multiple, let me have a look, over the last 10 years is actually 29.4 times. So we are looking at a materially lower valuation multiple relative to the historical 10-year mean. But again, valuation is more complex than just looking at a valuation multiple. The valuation multiple right now is rightfully way below the historical mean. Why? Because the company has, of course, matured, the growth has slowed, reinvestment opportunities are not as available as they were in the past, and investors are expecting a harder time going forward. There was actually one very good tweet that I came across that I also wanted to share with you. This one is from, where is it? It is from Tarek, and he wrote, Lululemon is getting hammered, down 29% this year, and honestly, I get why investors are spooked. The numbers still look decent on paper, price to earnings of 18 times, decent margin, 23% operating margin, 17%, I guess he's talking about net profit margins here, 10% revenue growth, solid balance sheet. Yeah, I covered all of that in my last video, so I get why people are tempted to look at Lululemon here. But here's the thing, the market's not buying it anymore. North America, their bread and butter, is slowing down hard, store traffic is dropping, inventory is piling up, and analysts are slashing growth forecasts. Plus, they're getting crushed by competition from Alo, Vuorori, probably butchering the pronunciation here, and Nike going all in on athleisure, throwing consumers tightening their belts and a strong dollar hurting international sales. Yeah, it's a mess. Look, I get the temptation to call this oversold, but catching falling knives usually ends up badly without clear turnaround catalysts, until Lulu shows they can actually re-accelerate growth or blow past lowered expectations. I'm staying on the sidelines. Sometimes the best trade is the one you don't make. What's your take, and so on and so forth. And yeah, of course, I would be curious to hear what your take is as well. I tend to agree with Tarek. So the way I think about it is you can probably make good money in Lululemon if you were maybe treating it as more of a short-term trade. As I showed you earlier, you could have made gains of 50, 60, 70% depending on your timing if you were able to exit at the previous top earlier this year. But as a longer-term hold, I think for investors, especially fundamental investors, it's just very good to have strong filters. And I do my best to stay away from retail stocks in general. And I try to stick with that. Sometimes I get tempted by opportunities like this one here maybe. But then again, as you can probably tell, I'm not super interested in doing another deep dive here to have high conviction in the long-term trajectory of where that business is heading. I really don't know. My hunch would be, but that's sort of just my high-level opinion here based on, well, my perception in my social circle, I guess, also the fashion that young people I see are wearing. People are not wearing tight leggings anymore. And of course, Lululemon is adjusting, but I think that was sort of their unique selling point, like tight sports apparel. And I myself, I find myself like buying more baggy clothes, trousers, and so on and so forth. And I don't know, that might change in a few years again, of course, but I don't know whether it will and what the next big trend will be. And I think that's sort of a headwind that Lululemon is dealing with right now, even though the company is still growing. So that itself, also considering the size of Lululemon, is already quite impressive. Okay, so hear me out. Here's what I'll do. I was actually talking longer about Lululemon than I expected. I'll call it a day here, and I'll cover the other topics I wanted to talk about in a separate video. Take care.